Hey, this is Buck Dharma of Blue Oyster Cult, and you're listening to the Sports Circus.
Welcome to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster, Sal, live from Las Vegas in the AMP-TV studio, AAMP Television. Today's show is brought to you by uppercutchops.com. Check out their tasty selection of all natural dry aged USDA prime Angus and Wagyu steaks and chops. Wait till you taste their best-in-class New York steaks, the filet mignon, and of course the king of all those gigantic cowboy cut and tomahawk cut ribeyes, best I've ever had. Probably be the best you ever have as well. Check them out at uppercutchops.com. That's uppercutchops.com. Or give them a call, find out what's for dinner, 714-948-0100, 714-948-0100. Again, 714-948-0100 for uppercutchops.com. All right, a big welcome in everybody listening in on our CBS, NBC, Fox Sports affiliates from coast to coast and all of our independents. Everybody watching on Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Frontier, Oceanic, Time Warner, Spectrum, Wall Charter, CBS, NBC, and independent affiliates in select markets, Hotel TV where applicable, in 500,000 rooms or so, coast to coast, of course, all Nielsen rated markets, as well as Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Check out Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook, fun group. Talk about your favorite foods, restaurants, recipes, make some friends, have some fun. Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. People are making a big deal about Jacob Misiorowski and his 101, 102, 103, 104, 105 mile an hour pitches. And hey, listen, I think that's great. And you could find your favorite, you could find your favorite news feed and everybody will hype this guy. Now, whether you're talking about this in the winter, in the summer, the spring, or fall, it doesn't matter. It's always the same story, right? Oh, wait, he threw this and he struck out this amount of batters at this particular speed. This one is courtesy of X and Major League Baseball. I'm going to go ahead and play this for you and listen to the hype.
And the payoff pitch. And trying to strike out the side. And it's a 1-2 and a... And Cole Carrick. And he's got Stro. And down.
Okay, so Jacob Misiorowski in a game in the not so distant past strikes out the first 7 batters. And they say with pure heat, which it wasn't pure heat because there was some off-speed pitches in there. Now, the bigger question is, what is his arsenal? What is Jacob Misiorowski pitching mix? All right, and if you look at it, technically he's got essentially 5 pitches. A 4-seam fastball, a cutter, a curveball, and then of course he has, what else does he? He throws in a slider and a change. But most of the time it's the 4-seam fastball. And it averages 95 to 100, which in today's time is rather commonplace in pitching. Sometimes hitting up to 102, 103, 104, something to the effect. And then, of course, the cutter he uses about 14% of the time, 90 to 96. Curveball about 11% of the time, 80. We'll call it about 85 to 88 miles an hour. The slider about 92 miles an hour. Changeup somewhere around 90 miles an hour. So you look at this pitching selection, you say, all right, that's pretty good stuff. It's very good. And we're certainly not going to take anything away from this guy. But what I'm after in the grand scheme of things is how he is so incredibly hyped. People say, well, he had thrown 58 pitches of at least 100 miles an hour during a 15 strikeout performance. Okay, I think that's great. He struck out 12 of Colorado's first 13 batters in another game. Well, guess what? Colorado is a pretty bad baseball team. And last I checked, they're the worst baseball team in Major League Baseball in the first place. So, yeah, although you'll say, well, geez, they're all Major League Baseball hitters. Correct. Again, not taking anything away from this kid because he is a super talent. But the hype is what I'm after. They say, well, he's setting this record, he's doing this, he's whatever. He's doing all these wonderful things, and I think that's fine. But just remember, all you've got to do as a hitter is dial it up a little bit. Sit on a pitch or two, and the reality is you go back to his pitch selection. You got a four-seam fastball and a cutter. It may vary anywhere between 4 or 5 miles an hour. And then the slider varies. It's almost the same speed as the cutter because they're very close to the same pitch. So technically, he's going to go to his strength because almost 2 out of every 3 pitches is a fastball. So the reality is this. Batting practice. When you get there for batting practice, you'll see the hitters cranking them out of the yard left, right, and center. And that's fine. That's fine. But when Misiorowski is pitching, it would occur to me that the hitting coaches should probably move that pitcher that's throwing batting practice, either move them up a little bit or have them throw a little bit harder because the distance is already less feet. And so when you look it up, we'll say distance batting practice pitcher is from hitter. All right. And so instead of the 60 foot 6 inches, they're really at a distance of about 45 to 50 foot. So if you put them at about 45 foot, then you increase the velocity of the speed of the pitch. Now your hitters could practice dialing it up to getting around faster on something that's 100 to 104 miles an hour. And at the end of the day, all you've got to do is really sit on a fastball and dial it up. Yeah, I know, easier said than done. But the reality is, I can tell you as a former pitcher, if you don't have a good mix, and I think his mix is pretty darn good from a splitter to a slider to the fastball to the curve and a change, which he really doesn't use the curve and change too much. And you could really chop it down into his curve at 11, change at 2%. This guy, 85% of the time, is throwing the ball 90 miles an hour for the most part or better. Actually, for about, we'll say it almost 1/3 of the time. He's throwing over 90. And for 2 out of every 3 pitches, well, this guy is throwing about 101, 102, something like that. So why wouldn't you just go up there sitting on dead red? Because you know you're going to see one somewhere. And likely, he's going to want to get ahead. The pitcher always wants to get ahead in the count because then they have more latitude on what they could throw if they're 1-2 or 0-2 against the hitter. Advantage pitcher. Now you can go to your full arsenal. You get a wipeout curveball, a wipeout splitter, or something like that. There's all kinds of stuff you can do as a pitcher when you're ahead of the count. So in the first or second pitch, you are going to see a fastball from Jacob Misiorowski. You could almost bank on it. And of course, if you go and bank on it, you know what'll happen. He'll throw 2 curveballs or something like that in a row. But the point is, since he goes to his 4-seam fastball, basically 2 out of every 3 pitches, you're going to see one in the first or second pitch. So why wouldn't you just sit on the fastball? If he beats you at a curveball, so be it. Because last I checked, and I've watched him quite a bit, his curveball is largely out of the strike zone. It's usually significantly out of the strike zone. That's his wipeout pitch. And so he'll either go to that as a wipeout pitch or he'll just go with a high heat. So why don't you just have all of the hitters sit on the high heat every at bat? Why would you do that? Well, I'll tell you why. It's real simple. Because he throws his changeup 2% of the time and he throws his curveball 11% of the time. That only makes up for 13% of his pitches. His 4-seam fastball at 64% of the time, cutter at 14, which is slightly less than the fastball, and the slider are about the same speed. The cutter and slider are very similar in speed. So what have you done? It's a math game, folks. Now you're playing probability. And you know he's not going to try to beat you with a curveball, typically. He's not going to. He's going to go to his strength. And people say, and I would agree, the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball. More importantly, hit a fastball. But if you have a situation where your pitcher is throwing that, we'll just say they're throwing 100 plus, we'll say 60, 70% of the time, you kind of know what to expect. So now it would behoove your pitching coach or whoever's throwing batting practice to stand closer and throw harder. Therefore, when you're going to face Misiorowski or any of these other fireballers out there, you already are prepared to dial it up and get around on the pitch. Because remember, the four-seam fastball is a straight pitch. It's just straight. There's no movement on it. It may rise a little bit depending on the pitcher. However, the two-seam fastball is the one that moves. So you know damn well if you're going to see a 100 mile an hour, 104 mile an hour pitch, all you got to do is lay the bat on the ball because the strength of the pitcher is going to carry the ball out of the park in the first place. And I can tell you that as a pitcher, this is basic data. And if you don't know, now you do know. But this is all basic data and mathematics. Again, this guy's throwing 2 out of every 3 four-seam at a $102, $104, whatever it is. Guess what? Dial it up and hit the damn ball. Back here with some comparisons on Jacob and some of the other greats. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come here on the Sports Circus.
That's the sound of sizzling, dry-aged USDA Prime Wagyu and Angus steaks from UppercutChops.com. Their best-in-class filet mignons, New York steaks, and the king of all steaks, the tomahawk and cowboy cut ribeyes are the best in the business. Even their Prime Wagyu burgers will likely be the best you've ever had. Browse the full selection of steaks and chops at UppercutChops.com from the comfort of your home or on your mobile device. UppercutChops.com delivers all-natural, dry-aged USDA Prime Wagyu and Angus steaks and chops directly to your door, without the hassle of going to the grocery store and fight crowds to pick from a small selection of average and best meats with injected steroids, fillers, and coloring added to look good. Find out what's for dinner at UppercutChops.com or call 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100. Or make your selection directly at UppercutChops.com.
39.
Feel the pulse of the night. Under the big top, the lights ignite. We're ready for the fight.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm Roy Firestone. Now it's time to throw it back to Sal.
Thank you, Roy, and welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster, Sal, live from Las Vegas in the AMP-TV studio, AAMP Television. This segment brought to you in part by our friends at the College of Southern Nevada Athletics. Check them out at csncoyotes.com for upcoming games and events. That's the College of Southern Nevada Athletics, csncoyotes.com. Check them out, folks. All right, welcome back to everybody listening in on our CBS, NBC, Fox Sports affiliates and independents, including our friends waking up with us over in Atlanta, WDJY 99.1 FM. Over in the greater Atlanta market. Thanks for waking up 8 a.m. Monday through Friday with us. Right down the road, Columbus, Georgia, all the way over to Auburn. War Eagle, our friends over in Auburn, Alabama, out to Montgomery as well. Same signal, WAUD 1230 on the AM dial. That is 7 p.m. Monday through Friday on the Atlanta Braves Radio Network. Up and down the Midwest, out to the West Coast, everybody driving on Interstate 15 between sunny Southern California and right here in Las Vegas, listening in on 94.9 FM, 96.9 FM as well. KNAC, Pure Rock, one of the great rock stations in American history on the West Coast. Out to our friends in Honolulu, CBS Sports, 1500 KHKA, that's the home of the New York Yankees, San Francisco 49ers, and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Thanks for driving home with us up and down the H1, H2 interstates over there in Hawaii, throughout the Hawaiian Islands. Thanks for joining us over there. Plus everybody on Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Frontier, Oceanic, Time Warner, Spectrum, Wild Charter, CBS, NBC Digital, and independent affiliates in select markets, of course, Hotel TV. Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Make sure you check out that group, Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. And, of course, everybody streaming on Pick Your Favorite Streamer. All right, talking about Jacob Misiorowski. And this is fun conversation, winter, summer, spring, fall, because it's about the evolution of a certain kind of a pitcher, a certain type of pitcher in Major League Baseball, where we didn't have a period that was loaded with a bunch of fireballers as we do in recent times. We have guys that are literally rearing back and throwing as hard as they can, seemingly. And if you want to hit these guys as a former pitcher, I can tell you, you just got to practice hitting at that speed, because you can kind of guess what he's going to got. He's going to go to his strength, which of course in Jacob Misiorowski's case, he's likely going to go to that four-seam fastball. That's the bread and butter. He throws it approximately 64% of the time. And again, sitting on that kind of a pitch, which essentially means you're going to see one. I'm going to say first or second pitch, likely. So even if you do good morning, good afternoon, and good night, so fastball, 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 you're going to see no less than one, possibly two of those fastballs. You might even see three if he's really feeling it, if he's dealing. So I bring it up for a very good reason, because people have this really big hype thing around Jacob. And I think Jacob's a great pitcher. But you got to realize, when you've got certain pitchers that are throwing certain pitches, and then you say, well, all right, let's take the worst team in baseball, for example, the Colorado Rockies. Well, what's interesting is that Jacob Misiorowski will rear back and fire. But then you got to realize, when these guys get their second and third time around the lineup, now they're no longer seeing the guy that's throwing that speed. And so now you end up with guys dialing it up to the speed. Now they're hitting line drives. And now they're hitting home runs. Just basically putting the bat on the ball, like I mentioned at the end of the first segment. So you think of Carrick, hits a 2-2 pitch, only 361 foot to the opposite field. That's right, off of a 102 mile an hour fastball, for example. And that was even according to MLB.com. So they say, well, geez, that was the 12th fastest pitch to result in a home run since the start of pitch tracking. Again, folks, all you got to do is lay the bat on the ball. It's hard, but it's not that hard. That's what I'm trying to say. So you got a guy that'll throw 140, 150 innings, whatever, maybe even up to 200 innings if they're lucky in today's time. But again, second time around the batting lineup, they've already seen what you got. Third time around, if you're lucky enough to get there, they know what you've got. And they have a pretty good idea of what to expect. So you say, all right, what is all the to-do about a guy that's throwing 100 miles an hour? Well, look, first of all, he's 6'7", 201 pound. So he's very, very, very lanky, kind of like a Randy Johnson type of a body, for example. Not like a Nolan Ryan. But when you compare Jacob Misiorowski to Randy Johnson, I mean, you come up with a very interesting, let's just say a very interesting comparison. Because Randy Johnson, from what I remember, he was 6'10", big slingshot delivery from the left side, very difficult to hit. And Randy's a Hall of Famer, needless to say. But when you compare these two, there are some similarities in their towering, lanky frames, elite extension, terrifying high velocity, arsenal that leaves hitters defenseless. But remember, Randy Johnson blew a bird up. Nonetheless, Randy built a legendary 22-year career, 303 wins in Major League Baseball, 5 Cy Young Awards. Jacob Misiorowski is, yes, he is an emerging talent. And he is making his mark. But I got to tell you, folks, if you're going to compare this guy to Randy Johnson, a living legend, well, you better think a couple times here. That's right. I mean, think about this. The extension factor is one bit when you think of their physical profiles. Look, both pitchers, they have that long, lanky frame, like I mentioned, and they, of course, would throw 100 plus, whatever. But the intimidation factor leans heavily towards Randy Johnson with that slingshot left-handed approach and that 6'10" frame. And he also had that snarl. He just had that look. I gotta tell you, that's a guy, I mean, when I was playing, Randy Johnson was playing. That's a guy that I would not want to face, especially as a left-handed stick. I would not want to face that guy just because I know I could either A, get killed, or I could end up like that bird that blew up that he threw and he obliterated that bird that just happened to fly in the path of the baseball. But ultimately, Randy Johnson, an incredibly intimidating pitcher. I mean, on all fronts, just ridiculous, I tell you. So there is that intimidation factor. I don't think Misiorowski has that as of yet. I mean, he throws hard, but he doesn't have the Randy Johnson it factor. And yes, Misiorowski will throw a .04. That's pretty damn fast, which, of course, power that essentially defines the young big unit. But think about this. So this guy comes out in 2025, magically makes the All-Star team very, very quickly, kind of like the Paul Skeens thing. But Paul Skeens certainly earned his way. I'm not saying Misiorowski didn't. And he's got that ERA of, we'll call it 1.35 to 1.5, right? And he's averaging something like 12 to 14 strikeouts per 9, which is great. The problem is this: second time through the lineup, third time through the lineup if he gets there. I don't know if he can get there, and I don't know how many innings he pitches on average per game, but I imagine that the Milwaukee Brewers try to keep him to a minimum so they can stretch out his career. But the one thing they can't do is they can't predict injury. Now look, Randy Johnson had 4,875 career strikeouts. Second to who? Nolan Ryan. We'll get to Nolan Ryan in a minute. But when you think about Misiorowski is merely in the early stage of his Major League Baseball career, really just a young kid. He's got a lot to learn, but he's got a lot to gain. And he has the big deception factor, which I think is really cool. So, yeah, they're sort of similar in the fact that they're lanky and they have a fast delivery, but he doesn't have the Randy Johnson slingshot approach. So by the time Randy Johnson released the ball, I'll tell you this much. The goal of driving off the pitcher's mound in the first place, as a pitcher, is to get yourself and that lower body moving as much as possible towards home plate to use your body to throw and to pick up all that speed. Now, Randy Johnson, not only did he do that, but he was so damn tall and long. By the time he threw that ball, he was already at the bottom of the pitcher's mound for the most part. When he followed through, Randy Johnson was already about 8 to 10 feet closer in that 60 foot 6 inches. So although he threw about 100, Randy was longer. And really, if you take the distance from home plate to the pitcher, to the rubber, it's 60 foot 6 inches. By the time he delivered, it was about 50 feet. And if that's the case, now you take that distance and then you factor in the speed. So you're getting about 16% more speed on that pitch. That's how you got to look at this. So now you really got to dial it up. So how do you do that against a pitcher in practice? You have your batting practice pitcher stand even closer, and you have a fireballer on the hill so you could rear back and hit guys like Randy Johnson or Jacob Misiorowski. That's how you hit them. Back here with a little bit of comparing of some of these great pitchers. Now, this is interesting dialogue because you probably haven't heard it explained that way as far as distance go, but that's a big deal. And some pitchers hide the ball a little bit better. And I'll tell you what, we're going to come back with that in just a few minutes here on the Sports Circus. Don't go anywhere. I'm your ringmaster Sal of the Sports Circus, a primetime nationally syndicated television, radio, sports, and entertainment show. The Sports Circus covers topics others are too scared to talk about. There's no other primetime show like it out here that'll punch you in the face and you'll beg for more. Join me, Hall of Famers, world champions, and all-star celebrity guests for chaos and controversy here on Libsyn and all podcast platforms, plus thesportscircus.com. Remember, folks, it's a circus and we prove it every day. I'm your ringmaster Sal of the Sports Circus, a primetime nationally syndicated television, radio, sports, and entertainment show. The Sports Circus covers topics others are too scared to talk about. There's no other primetime show like it out here that'll punch you in the face and you'll beg for more. Join me, Hall of Famers, world champions, and all-star celebrity guests for chaos and controversy here on Libsyn and all podcast platforms, plus thesportscircus.com. Remember, folks, it's a circus and we prove it every day.
Hey everyone, Dave Jackson here, ESPN rules analyst on ESPN Hockey, and you're listening to the Sports Circus.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster, Sal, live from Las Vegas in the MTV studio, AAMP television. Folks, make sure to check out thesportscircus.com for upcoming guests, prior guests, recorded shows which can be found on Apple, Amazon, Audible, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, iHeart, Stitcher, Deezer, Libsyn, plus a whole bunch of others. Also, check out the partners page. Lots of great partners. Our favorite, Al's Number One Italian Beef, 1079 West Taylor Street in Chicago's Little Italy. Al's Number One Italian Beef, 1079 West Taylor Street in Chicago's Little Italy. If you can't make it over there for some great food, check them out at alsbeef.com. That's alsbeef.com. Learn all about that famous Italian beef sandwich they created about 120 years ago. They opened their first restaurant in 1938, years after, and they're still in business today, doing it the same way they've always done it. Incredible food, always fresh, and they'll even send it to you by overnight express if you place an order at alsbeef.com. Tell them the circus sent you. Maybe they'll give you some extra fries or something. I have no idea, but that's our favorite and certainly will be yours as well. All right, welcome back to everybody on TV and radio. You know you are. Talking about pitchers and delivery of the ball, I left off with the big unit, Randy Johnson, when he had that really long delivery. And I wonder if there's something online that I could find that says, let's just see, distance Randy Johnson from hitter after pitch. How's that? All right, let's see what that is. Because it's 60 foot 6 inches. Yeah, there it is. And I made that estimate in the prior segment. I said it'd be about 50 foot. So let's think about this for a second. Look, this guy, 6'10". The distance from the pitching rubber to the home plate is 60 foot 6 inches. So because of his long, lanky body and his long delivery, imagine that. You've got really 50 foot. So let's take 50 foot and let's divide it by 60 foot. All right, so that's 83% or 17, it's 16.667%. So what we'll do is we'll put 100 miles an hour times 116.67. Folks, the reality is Randy Johnson, with that long, lanky delivery, was really calculated out to be throwing when he threw 100 at 116 miles an hour. 116. Now, Jacob Misiorowski does not have the long delivery as Randy Johnson did. But Jacob throws maybe a little bit harder. But Johnson, with that long body, he hit the ball well. So what's worse is now he's hiding it behind his body and so forth. So now you've got 50 foot and you got a ball coming in at over 100, which calculates out to about 116, almost 117 miles an hour. And by the way, it's kind of like hitting, I don't know if you've done this, folks, but there are batting cages out there, and there are batting cages with wheels and batting cages with arms. The arms are the ones that you want to hit out of because you can actually see a motion that may somehow, in its own way, it may simulate a pitcher's arm throwing a ball. And so you could sort of time it just like with a pitcher. But when you have two wheels spitting out a ball, there is no warning except maybe a warning light. But it's got you flat-footed. And so the reality is this. When you have a pitcher that hides the ball well, it's awfully hard to pick up the ball, first of all. And then secondly, when they're 5 to 10 feet closer than the next great pitcher or whatnot, or what you're used to, and plus they're a hell of a lot harder throwing, now it makes it even more difficult to hit. That's why people say the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball, especially off a guy like Randy Johnson. I mean, arguably, in my opinion, I don't know of a more intimidating pitcher. People say, well, Bob Gibson. Yeah, not like Randy Johnson. It's a whole different animal, ladies and gentlemen, and I mean a different animal. But the reality is this. when you compare Randy Johnson to Jacob Misiorowski, these are two pitchers that threw and throw hard. But this is a very different delivery, a very different everything. Pure speed right now would go to Jacob Misiorowski. But the reality is the intimidation factor goes to Randy Johnson 12 days a week. Now, again, I'm not taking anything away from Jacob. I mean, look, in his career, let's face it, he's, 16-7 or something to the effect, whatnot, and a whole lot of strikeouts. Walks and hits per innings pitch under 1, which is Hall of Fame level. Wins above replacement, all-star level for sure. Earned run average, very low. And he's one of those guys that really does it. So you think about in his career up to this point, 186 innings pitched. And he's got 272 strikeouts. That's pretty darn good. But the reality is, out of 23 starts, so what we'll do is we'll go 186 divided by 23, right? And that is a solid average of about 8 innings, which is really good. Can he maintain that? In today's pitching regimen, as far as the strength and conditioning goes, statistics are absolutely, in my opinion, against the longevity of Jacob Misiorowski. Now, let's do another comparison. Let's take the great Nolan Ryan. The great Nolan Ryan is one of those guys that he just had the God-given arm. 27 years of Major League Baseball. That's right, 27. Finished at what? 324 and 292. He was on some pretty bad teams in Major League Baseball, but the guy ended up still winning over 300 games. His wins above replacement average, career long, just under 4. That's not bad. Every year he averaged more wins than losses. Great news. Earned run average for his career, 3.19. And that's for 27 years. That's right. And by the way, he started 773 games. He completed 222 games. So this guy was completing, we'll call it about 30%, we'll call it about 30% of his games. He had 61 shutouts. He even had 3 saves. Nolan Ryan pitched 5,386 innings. He only gave up 3,900 hits. 2,100 runs. Actually, 1,911 earned runs in 5,386 innings pitched. He gave up only 321 home runs. It sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. In 27 years, that's not so bad. Averaging per year about 14 homers per year, which again, when the hitters are facing gasoline, this is what happens. He walked to quite a few guys, but remember, he has a strikeout number that arguably nobody will ever break. He struck out 5,714 batters. That's a lot. That is a lot. He faced 22,575 batters. That's insane. I mean, seriously, folks, when you think about that, this guy did the unthinkable. And you say, all right, this guy had 9 years on a decent team in Houston, 8 years on a mediocre at best team with the California Angels, 5 years with the Texas Rangers that were mediocre at best, 5 years with the New York Metropolitans, a terrible team. This guy wasn't on a good team. Jacob Misiorowski is on a very good team. Randy Johnson was on a pretty good Arizona Diamondbacks team and a very good Seattle Mariners team. But think, when you are looking at what Nolan Ryan did in his career, yeah, absolutely a Hall of Famer. And every bit of it earned it. This guy was the gold standard for a big arm. And by the way, he wasn't the only one that threw 100 miles an hour on his Houston Astros team that he played for 9 years. There was Nolan Ryan throwing over 100, a different baseball too, by the way, heavier ball. There was Mike Scott throwing over 100 miles an hour. We're talking, 1980? And there was also J.R. Richard throwing over 100 miles an hour. 3 guys on the starting rotation throwing over 100 miles an hour. That's right. No team that I can even recall has seen that kind of velocity ever since the Houston Astros. Back here in a few minutes on the circus. Don't go anywhere.
Step right up! The show is about to start! With a heart of fire and a restless heart. Under the big top, where the wild ones reign, Ringmaster Sal, the master of the insane. With a smile painted fierce, he runs the whole game. Loudspeaker voice, calling out all the names. Lions roar and the audience calls. Sal's up there, making sure no one falls. With a crack of the whip, he owns the floor. Life's a circus, baby, and he's wanting more. Hey, 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 this is Ringmaster Sal, bringing the thunder, raising the crowd. In the heart of the circus, he's taking a bow. Sports in the wild and mixing right now. Hey, 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 feel the roar of the crowd with the heartbeat of rock. He's making us proud under the lights with the fireworks and sound. Ringmaster Sal, he's the king of this town. Koufax spinning, the flying so high. Trapeze in the air, he's grinning up to the sky. Glitter and sweat running through his veins. A juggler of dreams where thrill never wanes. From the roar of the game to the thrill of the show, he's got the spirit, he's the star of the glow. With athletes colliding, the passions collide. In the ring with Sal, there's nowhere to hide. Hey, this is Ringmaster Sal, bringing the thunder, raising the crowd. In the heart of the circus, he's taking a bow. Sports in the wild, we're mixing right now. Yeah, feel the roar of the crowd with the heartbeat of rock. He's making us proud under the lights with the fireworks and sound. Ringmaster Sal, he's the king of this town. So step right up for the ride of your life. Ringmaster Sal, cutting through like a knife. Together we rise and together we fall. In the wild, wild circus where we give it all.
Hey everybody, this is Brian Urlacher. Welcome back to the Sports Circus.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your Ringmaster Sal, live from Las Vegas in the AMTV studio, AAMP Television. Folks, make sure you check out the store at thesportscircus.com. Lots of great items, hats, hoodies, t-shirts, ball caps, beanie hats, sweatpants, sweat coats, travel mugs, coffee mugs, mouse pads, pillows, all kinds of great items with the clever Sports Circus logo on them. That's the store at thesportscircus.com. Make sure you check that out. Enter in Ringmaster Sal on the memo for an additional 10% off your first purchase. Oh yeah, how do you like that? Excellent compliments of me. Yes, Ringmaster Sal. All right. Welcome back, everybody, on our CBS NBC Fox Sports Affiliate, independent from coast to coast. Everybody on radio, and of course, everybody on television, watching our Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Frontier, Oceanic, Time Warner, Spectrum, WOW, Cable, and who else? NBC, CBS Digital, independent affiliates in select markets. Also, Hotel TV, that is in every Nielsen rated market, where applicable, of course, as well as Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Check that group out, Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Talk about your favorite foods, restaurants, recipes, make some friends, have some fun. Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Back to this comparison. Now, look, Nolan Ryan was in a very, very special class of his own. I mean, the guy just, he did stuff that other people couldn't do in the same way that Randy Johnson did things that others just straight up couldn't do. And Jacob Misiorowski, a very, very good young pitcher. I've already compared Randy Johnson to him, but how about comparing Nolan Ryan to Jacob Misiorowski just because we can? So look, they both have the fireball situation, right? But they differ significantly in their physical extension, control, their profile. Of course, Misiorowski being 6'7", Nolan Ryan about 6'2". And some people say, well, you know, the Hall of Famer career strikeout king famously threw his high 90s heat in the era with different radar technology, clocked at the plate rather than released. A very different situation. So Nolan Ryan, again, it was the same argument that I gave with Randy Johnson. And so think about this. The math actually suggests the peak equivalent velocity of Nolan Ryan at 108 miles per hour. That's right. For 27 years. That's right. 27 years. Now, Misiorowski, of course, benefits from that big 7'6" extension, kind of like Randy Johnson had the 10-foot extension, whatever. However, he didn't really hide the ball. He doesn't really hide the ball as well as guys like Nolan Ryan. Nolan hit the ball really well, and so did Randy. But remember, Nolan relied heavily on that legendary lower half torque. Kind of like Tom Seaver had the same thing, but Tom didn't throw as hard as Nolan did. And again, you know, pitching into his 40s. And Misiorowski, look, in his mid-20s. Look, he's got a long ways to go and injuries to fight through potentially down the road. But Ryan, famous for his wildness early in his career, walking, 7 batters per 9 innings at age 24 before really figuring it out. Again, that untouchable record of 5,714 career strikeouts. Nobody is ever going to beat that. Sorry, folks. It is what it is. Ryan, just a very different animal. And just because we can, we're going to compare Nolan Ryan and Randy Johnson, right? These are the two most terrifying power pitchers, I think, in baseball history. And really, it's Ryan's unmatched longevity and all-time strikeout record versus Johnson's superior peak dominance and Cy Young hardware. So Ryan, he finished, 324 and I think it was 292 with an ERA of 3.19, 57-14 strikeouts, 7 no-hitters, 27 seasons. Randy Johnson, 303 and 166, but Randy was on better teams too. His ERA was just a little bit better than, or a little bit less than Ryan's. Ryan was 3.19, and Randy Johnson 3.29. But Nolan Ryan had 900 more strikeouts than Randy Johnson. Randy Johnson did not have a no-hitter, but he had 5 Cy Young Awards, 1 World Series MVP, and he pitched 5 less seasons, but 7 no-hitters. 7 for Nolan Ryan. That's crazy. Strikeout rate? Look, Randy Johnson held a higher career strikeout per 9 at 10.76 compared to Nolan Ryan's 9.55. However, Johnson won 4 consecutive Cy Young Awards on very good teams, too. And so Ryan, well, he never won a Cy Young. Imagine that, even with his devastating stuff. Physical presence, obviously, it goes to Randy Johnson because he was just a towering human. But the reality is, Randy Johnson versus Nolan Ryan, geez, you flip a coin because they both threw a very different game, but Randy Johnson was on better teams. Imagine Nolan Ryan on teams just like Randy Johnson. That's right. That's what you got to consider. And so, in the reality of things, the game was a little bit tougher when Nolan Ryan was pitching in that long career of his. Now, can you put Misiorowski in that discussion? No, not at all. Johnson pitched 22 years, Ryan pitched 27. Misiorowski's only pitched a couple years, if that. So the reality is, it's no comparison. People say, what about Nolan Ryan and Bob Gibson? I mean, since you're going there, why not go there? Nolan Ryan and Gibson, 2 of the most intimidating and fierce power pitchers in baseball history. And guess what? They would both, just in case they had to, yes, they would get you. They could fight too. So Ryan and Gibson, look, 2 incredibly intimidating pitchers. Ryan holds the all-time record for strikeouts, as I mentioned, and no-hitters. That's right, across those 27. But Gibson was that ferocious competitor who famously posted a 1.12 ERA in 1968. He won a couple of Cy Youngs and a couple of World Series MVPs. That's right, over 17. But Nolan pitched a decade longer than Bob Gibson. And so you say, well, Bob Gibson, he was a fireballer and he threw hard, but he did not throw as hard as Nolan Ryan. Gibson threw 17 seasons entirely for the St. Louis Cardinals, 251, 174, win percentage very similar. But again, 10 seasons less than Nolan. He had a 2.19 or 2.991 ERA with 3,117 strikeouts and 255 complete games, because that's what they did back in the day. Ryan had 300 and some odd complete games. However, Bob Gibson pitched 10 years less. Had a lower ERA, but not by that much. That's right. So exceptional control compared to Ryan. 9 gold gloves and an intense competitive drive. So Gibson, he had good delivery. He fielded his position very, very well. But I would still, if I had to pick between the 2, I would still take Nolan Ryan because, again, you got to remember, Bob Gibson was on better teams than Nolan Ryan. In the same way Randy Johnson was on better teams than Nolan Ryan. You put Ryan on those teams. So you say, well, all right, well, Gibson was really good. But now was he better than Sandy Koufax? Why are we going there? Because we can. Koufax had breathtaking shorter peak with 3 Cy Youngs, while Gibson pitched longer, of course, with that great ERA. Koufax, 165 and 87. ERA 2.76 for his career. Sub-ERA of 2 in his final 4 dominant seasons. Struck out 23.96 and 23.20, averaging over a strikeout per inning. 3 Cy Young, 1 regular season MVP. Gibson had more wins, far more losses, to over double the losses, the exact double amount of losses that Sandy Koufax had. And Gibson had a higher earned run average, 2.91 versus Koufax's 2.76. Now, Gibson struck out 31-17 in 3,879 innings, whereas Koufax struck out 23.96 in only 2,320 innings. Again, better numbers on Sandy Koufax. And again, it was Bob Gibson that had 2 World Series MVPs, 1 regular season MVP, and Sandy Koufax only had 1 regular season MVP. So he did not pitch as long as Bob Gibson. And I would argue that these 2 are almost a dead heat. They're almost a tie when it comes to intimidation factor and when it comes to, I guess, overall performance. Look, Koufax had a blazing fastball. Everybody knows that. It appeared to rise as well. And I actually threw a rising fastball myself. And it's just all physics. It depends how you release the ball. But he had that big 12-6 curve too. And he pitched with incredible grace. It just really, he just did not intentionally throw at anybody. Gibson, on the other hand, was one of those intimidating, aggressive pitchers. He owned the inside part of the plate, which I absolutely respect. And I love that because I modeled my game after the guys that command the inside part of the plate. You stay off the inside part of the plate, you're going to get hit. And if your hands are over the plate, I'm going to hit your hands because I own that real estate. And guess what? If I hit you and your hands are over the plate, it is a strike. It's not a hit batsman, in case you're keeping score. But two very different styles. Just like if you compare all the other guys. I mean, look, we could do this one all day. But ultimately, it comes down to intimidation with Bob Gibson, Randy Johnson, Nolan Ryan, versus just pure grace. It's almost like the old Walter Payton poetry in motion thing. And you've got Sandy Koufax, who is just so smooth. So smooth. Steve Carlton was a spinoff of him. And I would even argue from the right side that Tom Seaver and even Jim Palmer, the great Jim Palmer, these guys were out of that right-handed side of the camp of Sandy Koufax. And when you look at these guys, you say, wow, they just have a certain, what do they say in French? They say it's a je ne sais quoi. Right? You have a certain something. And it's the it factor. That it factor is everything in pitching. Because if the hitters are intimidated one way or another, think of Ohtani. Ohtani's a nice guy, but he is remarkably intimidating, but a very nice guy. If he happens to plunk you, he'll apologize for it. Guys like Gibson would say, get out of the way. But the reality is there are different styles at Koufax, at Ryan, at Gibson, and Johnson. And Misiorowski is creating his own. Jacob Misiorowski is going to be a great pitcher for a long time, so long as he doesn't blow his elbow or shoulder out. Misiorowski is going to be around for a very, very long time. Watch out for that kid. He may win 300 games, and he may even have 4,000 strikeouts. We'll see you in 24 hours, or better yet, 23 hours, right here on your favorite station. Until then, so long, everyone.
Why pay retail for your next car? Just visit beepinautos.com to find your new-to-you car or truck. They find cars for people, even when cars are hard to find. So just go to beepinautos.com and click on Find Me a Car, and they find your perfect car on the wholesale market. Beepinautos.com. They're a car concierge. Beepinautos.com. BEEPIN autos.com. Beepinautos.com. Now you have a friend in the car business when you need it most. Trusted since 2013. Just click Find Me a Car at beepinautos.com.
I'm your ringmaster Sal of the Sports Circus, a primetime nationally syndicated television, radio, sports, and entertainment show. The Sports Circus covers topics others are too scared to talk about. There's no other primetime show like it out here that'll punch you in the face and you'll beg for more. Join me, Hall of Famers, world champions, and all-star celebrity guests for chaos and controversy here on Libsyn and all podcast platforms, plus thesportscircus.com. Remember, folks, it's a circus and we prove it every day.